What would you do if you were trapped on a ship in the middle of the ocean with freezing temperatures? A group of over 1,000 people once had to endure these conditions for weeks at a time, and they did so in an incredibly cramped space while eating nothing but frozen fish. So what happened to them, and how did they survive? The year was 1971, and the cargo ship named the Igor K. Mossov was sailing through the northern coast of Russia when it ran into some trouble. The ship's hull started to crack due to the stress of the rough waves, and by the time they reached port, the situation had become critical. In fact, there were holes everywhere in the ship's hull. They were so bad that you could literally see inside the ship's inner workings from the outside. But even though the captain knew that this ship was falling apart, he didn't think that anything terrible would happen. So he still decided to sail it to the city of Murmansk, which is about 435 miles away. But after a few days of sailing, he realized that his crew would never make it alive. This was due to the fact that the temperature outside was about -73 degrees Celsius, which is about -99 degrees Fahrenheit. And if they stayed out in those elements any longer, they would immediately freeze to death. So what did the captain do to try to save his crew? Well, first he sent a distress signal to the authorities on land. He explained the severity of the situation and asked for assistance. But because of the distance and the bad weather conditions, no one could reach them. So it seemed like the only option left was to keep sailing until they reached land, or they would all die from hypothermia. Unfortunately though, the weather got much worse. Storms started to hit the ship, and massive cracks began to form in the walls. With the freezing cold seeping in, the sailors were forced to take shelter in the lower decks of the ship, where they could at least find some warmth from the engine. But they were packed in there like sardines, shoulder to shoulder. It must have been so uncomfortable. And this is when things got really scary. One of the sailors fell seriously ill, and soon the whole lower deck started coming down with the same illness. All they had to eat was frozen fish, and they drank nothing but seawater. They were also given some medicine to help keep their bodies warm. But because there was no food or water, everyone became severely malnourished. This led to many of them fainting, especially since they were already exhausted from trying to pump water out of the ship to keep it afloat. After a few days, 2 of the sailors tried to get some fresh air on the top deck, but as soon as their heads came out of the hatch, they both froze to death. Everyone was horrified to see what had happened, and no one wanted to go out anymore. The rest of the sailors stayed on the lower decks for 3 weeks straight. They barely moved during this time, and those who were able to walk slowly lost their mobility. Even though they were extremely thirsty, no one dared to leave the lower decks and come out into the harsh weather. Imagine being trapped in a room for 3 weeks without any furniture. You can't even leave to use the bathroom. Not to mention you don't have any food or clean water. It sounds absolutely horrible, but eventually, after 3 long weeks, the captain received a response to his original distress call. 2 icebreakers, named the 50 Years of October and the Kapitan Drozdov, were sent to search for survivors. The sailors heard the sound of the icebreakers and started waving their arms frantically, hoping to get someone's attention. When the icebreakers finally opened a hole in the ice, the sailors were so happy. They were ready to be rescued. But unfortunately, the rescuers couldn't just jump into action right away. You see, the ship's broken hull was filled with ice, so getting the sailors out safely was very difficult. Plus, the sailors were so weak that they couldn't even help themselves. It took about 2 days for the sailors to be brought off the ship, one by one. By the end, 1,200 people were successfully taken off the ship, and 14 of them were brought to hospitals on the mainland. Everyone thought that the worst part of this ordeal was over. But then the survivors started to succumb to deadly infections. Even though the temperature on the ship was below 0 degrees Celsius, the sailors didn't change their clothes for 3 weeks. And this led to severe bacterial growth. Soon, more than half of the survivors were dead. I cannot imagine what these poor people had to go through. It's amazing that anyone could survive such harsh conditions for so long. What's even more incredible is that a similar incident happened just a few years ago, in 2021, and it's the reason why we're making this video. You see, back in 2021, a wooden cargo ship named the Crimson Polaris got stuck in the ice. This ship was carrying 26 crew members, and it was supposed to be delivering wood pellets to a power plant. But due to the extreme weather, the ship got blocked in by ice and snow. The waves started crashing against the ship, causing several holes in the side. The freezing temperatures made the situation worse, and within 24 hours, the ship's engine room started to flood. This meant that the crew needed to abandon ship, but the captain tried everything he could to contact the Coast Guard and request assistance. Unfortunately, the weather was so bad that no one was available to help them, so the captain radioed the crew and told them to put on their survival suits and life jackets and prepare for evacuation as the freezing winds hit their bodies. The men quickly made their way to the life rafts, but before they left, they had to cut open a hole in the ship's hull. Once in the life rafts, the men huddled together to stay warm and to comfort each other. They also had lifebuoys to keep them afloat and emergency beacons to call for help. But most importantly, they had hot meals and warm drinks, unlike the sailors who had to eat frozen fish and drink seawater. As night fell, the wind chill made the temperature feel like it was about 79 degrees Celsius. Luckily, after 18 hours, the Coast Guard finally arrived and saved all 26 crew members. None of them died, but this was definitely a close call. A lot of people may not believe that others would be willing to put themselves in harm's way to save a bunch of strangers. But these two captains are a prime example of this. Captain Nikolai F. Fedyushkin was the captain of the first icebreaker that went to rescue the sailors from the Igor K. Mossoff. And even though he had never met these people before, he risked his own life to save theirs. When he received word that there were people stranded on the ship, he immediately dropped everything and headed over. He used his ship to break through the thickest ice so that the other ship could reach the survivors. Without his quick thinking, many of the sailors would have likely died from exposure. Similarly, the captain of the second icebreaker also put his life on the line to save the survivors. These 4 men are true heroes. They risk their lives every day as they work to save others. It takes a special kind of person to do this kind of work. They're known as icebreakers because they literally break through the ice in the freezing cold waters. It's hard work that requires strength, stamina, and courage. That's why it's so important that these men are well trained and prepared for anything. They need to know how to handle the equipment and how to work together as a team. They also need to be physically fit and mentally strong. After all, they're dealing with some of the most extreme conditions imaginable. These men are true heroes, and we're grateful for their service. Next time you see a member of the Coast Guard, be sure to thank him for his bravery. Who knows, maybe he'll be the one to save your life one day. Before the ship's engine broke down, there were 244 passengers and 750 crew members on board. But since the ship was in international waters, the Russians refused to come save them. So it was up to the Finnish Navy to save everyone. Thankfully, they were able to rescue everyone without any injuries. If you want to hear more crazy survival stories, stay tuned.